Yes, so just for Brian, who's the person that came in for, is that Jason or
Yeah.
Dwayne? Jason, okay. So I'm calling this meeting to order. The first thing on the agenda is to approve today's agenda, which Andy sent to us earlier. So if you all need to take a look at that, please do. Give you a moment to do that.
I can also share that on the screen if that's helpful.
Before we get into that, can I get a roll call of staff present other than Andy, Charlie, and Kevin via Zoom?
Yeah, Ryan Kennelly is here.
Very good. No Emily, no Ross, no Byron, correct?
Not yet.
Okay.
I move we have approved the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Jason. And Bruce, second?
Paul.
Paul,
Second.
I'm sorry. So we have Jason and Paul. Everyone in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay. Next, the approval of the minutes from last month's meeting, January 28th. I hope you all have had a chance to review them. I didn't see anything that needed to be updated, so Brian continues to do stellar work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move we approve the minutes.
Okay. From what was Ed, and do I have a second?
Second.
All right, from Bruce. So we have Ed and Bruce. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we'll start off with some old business. And I think, Andy, were you the one that's going to give us the update on Cuscowilla, the Camp McConnell?
Yeah, Charlie, do you want to, or would you like me to?
Thank you for putting up the map. I'll go ahead and give the update. Things are starting to move out there at good old Camp McConnell, now Cuscowilla. It's been a pretty long road, but all the forces seem to be coming together. The county's facilities department is out there and really undertaking a lot of upgrades right now. For instance, the lodge is under asbestos abatement. So they're pulling the ceiling out of that and doing a lot of work in the lodge. The manager's restaurant residence has gotten new flooring and is about to get a new kitchen. Bids have come in for refurbishment of the pool. A lot of the flooring, interior painting, and foundation work has been done in the cabins. So everything is pushing forward towards some type of an opening this summer. We have been called to go out to the property and really start to take charge of some of the natural resource management in the more natural areas. And what Andy has shared with you is a map that attempts to show what land conservation will be responsible for versus the Parks Department. The cross-hatching on this map doesn't show up particularly well, but basically you'll see that there's cross-hatching over 113 acres of this area. This excludes pretty much all of the improvements on the property and includes all of the areas that are in natural timber. The one big area close to where Andy had her cursor is the old pasture where the stable is. That would be excluded from our responsibilities as well. So we're going to get out there and get to know the site better. One of the biggest issues, of course, on this property is invasive exotics, and we'll start to put together a treatment plan out there. And it's just ultimately it's going to be a a multi-departmental county operation. Oh, I guess the one thing I did fail to really mention in terms of improvements is that the county is getting ready to do some improvements on the lake to provide lake access. There's going to be, I believe it's about a 300-foot wide shoreline along the edge of the lake that will be cleared of aquatic vegetation, and they're going to put a 150-foot dock out into the lake to provide access. So those plans have been drawn up, and we'll be getting underway soon as well. So since this is a Wild Spaces acquisition, and since this is kind of a new endeavor for the Land Conservation Office, we thought you guys would appreciate an update out here. Andy, did I miss anything?
Excuse me.
No, I think that's the key point.
Can I ask where the money comes from to fix the building?
Wild Spaces.
I know we don't have any say about it, but I don't like that.
Well, there's always been, you know, when the initiative was put before the voters, it was for both land acquisition and park improvements. The county has allocated 90% of its share of wild spaces for land conservation, and it's you know, some of the 10% that's going into the improvement of the facilities out here at Cuskawilla. So it's not taking away from land conservation at all.
And the 50% that the city's got, or the municipalities, what percent went to land conservation?
The city is putting essentially none of their wild spaces money into land conservation. All of theirs is going into park improvements.
You live in the city? No. Okay.
Does anyone else have any questions for Charlie?
I do.
Okay.
I may have missed this, but I have a vague memory that the county wanted to lease this to a nonprofit and all that. What happened with that?
That did not work out.
Didn't work out. Okay.
Right. We went through a couple of iterations with potential partners. Neither of them worked out. So the county made the decision to undertake improvements and management on its own.
And what's the proposed use? I saw an advertisement for like a environmental coordinator or something like that. What is the plan for its use?
Yes, there currently is a position on the street to hire a manager who will live on site and will manage both the facilities and the programs out there.
Thank you. Bruce, you've had your hand up.
Yes, I'm a director of the Friends of Cuskawilla, and when it comes to money, what we're going to be doing is raising money for things like scholarships for the kids. I don't know what other things we're raising money for, but that's one of what we're doing. And also, the county has been getting some grant money for things like sports equipment, bats and balls and things like that. So a lot of help is coming in from a lot of places in addition to the money that the county has spent outright. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just to maybe answer BJ's question a little bit more detail, it's intended to have a summer camp and then as a venue for outdoor events that people could reserve and rent.
Spirit of Cuskawilla.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. All right. Our other old business is an update on the Lake Forest Creek project area, the parcels in that area that have been nominated. Andy, I think that was you, right?
Actually, that's Kevin.
Okay, sorry.
Nothing is me tonight. It's except I have to undo my annotation and I'm being ineffective. I'm sorry. sorry. I'm not getting my annotation thing back. Anybody know how to do that?
Annotation, what do you mean?
I
I mean, maybe if you close it until it don't save and reopen it.
Or if you look on the pointer options,
Oh, there, I
There it is.
got it back, sorry.
it's just hiding.
There we go. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, my apologies, okay. Kevin, would you like me to advance to the slide the map that you had prepared?
Well, I guess we could talk about this one for 2 seconds, just so to orient people. On this one, as far as I understand, we were asked for general update on the Lake Forest Creek project area. And so in this map, it's all the blue or lightly shaded blue footprint. And then the green, our nature, different public lands that are in conservation. Okay, I think the next slide, please. In here, the background of blue is, again, this is kind of more of a zoomed in perspective. The blue is, again, what the Lake Forest Creek footprint is. And then we just updated the image here based on our files of what was on the active acquisition list and what's on the eligibility pool. So what's in red is on our active acquisition list, and the orange is the eligibility pool. I will say I did a bit of research, and 5 of these red properties have been sold that I'm aware of, or a change of ownership, so that we would quite possibly not have a willing seller. And specifically within there that Andy is highlighting, 2 of the holder properties that were on the active acquisition list have now been sold just in the last year.
Andy, can you point those?
Circled it.
Right here in this,
Oh, okay, yeah.
That is, in essence, I can say that I think the most southwestern part, south of 20, I think that has been sold. And then there's one off screen in the northwest, north of Morningside, that has been purchased by the city. And there was another one that is now part of the Noonan's Lake State Forest. So several of these have been purchased by, and placed in conservation, either by the city or the state. The other ones, more towards 20, are private purchases.
So I was the one, I think, is this from my prompting? Okay. My biggest question was the corridor between Morningside Nature Center and Paynes Ferry.
Yep.
And I had a couple people were asking me about it, and I was like, well, you should just, submit them. And then I was thinking that's probably already been submitted. And so that's why I asked Andy for a status update before you guys got another document that you had to tell somebody that was useless. So I'm assuming all those properties, or if they haven't, let me know, have been nominated?
Yeah, we'd have to look at that specific question. We had 158 records within the Lake Forest Creek footprint that have basically been nominated. I was more trying to answer what was on the eligibility or active acquisition lists.
Right. So my question to you guys would be, should I have those folks submit a new nomination of those parcels to get maybe revisited, or?
I would have to look at those specific. I was unaware that the main thrust was between Paynes Ferry and Morningside.
Okay.
So that's more focused and easier to.
I know the bottom two were, because I think that ACT was working on them, the ones abutting Paynes Prairie, and I think the blue and the red are both owned by the same person.
Mm-hmm.
And because I talked to Ivor Kincaid about this a little bit, and I think his flippant answer was the guy who owns them isn't really much a developer at the time, but he did not like the county at all.
Was it Crudman Caddy?
Yep, that's what it was.
One of those was sold recently to K Squared something or other.
Okay, well, last time I looked, those two on the bottom, I think were still in the same ownership.
Okay.
That may be wrong, but I mean, I thought that's what the nature of it was. Anyway, I would like, if you guys could, give me a little direction, unless it's just easy enough for you to take someone to submit a nomination, and then you just say, well, 3 of these have already been nominated, so we don't need to do that.
Yeah, but I guess what you're asking is how do you re-engage reaching out to those landowners and asking them if they're interested, right? I mean,
Right. I vaguely remember things kind of fell apart on some of them for a variety of reasons, but it was one of those things where, as you said, there's new owners.
Mm-hmm.
That could be good or bad. And I just would some direction from you guys to let the people know that I was talking to. Should they nominate it or should they hold off? Is nominating it basically fine? If it's already been nominated, you're like, okay, whatever. And if it hasn't, then you'll address that.
I can definitely look at those parcels and figure out if they've even, some of them I would suggest, yes, have been nominated. I don't know if all of them have been, but we can give you more of a definitive answer on that. And in general, when land is renominated, it does re-engage our reach out to the landowner.
Okay, because there is some interesting stuff I've always been wondering, like what happens to Florence landfill? I'm assuming at some point they will be done with their landfill, and you know, what is the nature of those types of properties? Because a lot of it's still very forested, and I think the other 2 landowner that's out there, it may not actually be in the project area, is Whitehurst Farms or something like that, Whitehurst Cattle, and you know, that's kind of an interesting matrix of stuff that's already been acquired with the Cone Park. There's a large portion of Cone Park that's not active rec, it's just land. And then there's some easement stuff that goes along there also across from Morningside. So I'll have them nominate the parcels in that corridor. I'm fairly familiar with it, and it's an interesting, you know, it's a tenuous link, but it's an interesting link, and it's got an interesting habitat that, you know, obviously hasn't been managed in forever. But there's definitely wiregrass and stuff. There's a lot of ground cover. Yeah. It just needs to be burnt. And, you know, there's some, I think, pond pines down in there, some interesting little ravines and stuff that transition from the sand hill or whatever it is. So it's just a thought. I know that it's one of those that's probably on the critically about to get nixed, but it's also the east side stuff, which sometimes doesn't get nixed. It just kind of sits forever depending on your views about what should be happening out there, for better or for worse. But and I also don't know the dynamics with the east side development focus the city. So anyway, I will have them submit the parcels again, and then I appreciate your guys indulging me with this question.
Looks like Brian has a question.
I think, yeah, Brian, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if staff has an update. The last, the property immediately adjacent to Morningside across from University there on the south side, of course, it's all in red. The last I recall on that one was that there was by the landowner. I think it all ended up in one common ownership going all the way to everything in red. There was an impasse and they were talking about trying to put in a assisted living facility or a nursing home of some type. This is 12 years ago. Anybody have any status updates on what may or may not have happened there?
I think that may be Kevin's point, is the parcel's been sold recently, so.
That was
Nobody
sold
knows.
recently? Okay.
I don't believe those were sold, but I believe they were for sale. And for the most part, the focus was on the city to potentially purchase that. I believe at one point they reached out to us and asked us to purchase it and also manage it because they were understaffed.
Yeah, Jeff Woods was the last I had heard about that, and got I don't recall there being an update since then.
Jeff Parks?
Yes, excuse me, Jeff Parks. Jeff Woods, Jeff Parks.
Okay, well, like I said, I'll relate that to the folks that were asking about it, and then I'll have them, submit. The people own it now is Dimitri Metro at Forest Creek. That parcel right across from Morningside is Dimitri Metro at Forest
Correct.
Creek.
Yep.
So, anyway.
Our
If
hope
any-
was the city might use some of their wild spaces, public places funds, but that has not come to fruition.
I think that the city, from what I understand, is that you're gonna have to get commissioners behind it before anything happens, because right now they're in a place where they're under a directive, I think, from Nancy Lyons still, where they're not purchasing any property. It was like they were told not to purchase property. So, it's unfortunate.
Thank you. Does anyone have any other questions or comments related to this issue? All right, so we're going to move on to new business, and I believe Charlie is going to give us a presentation. The staff was asked by the Board of County Commissioners to talk to them about how some recently acquired lands are being managed, particularly in relation to public access and concerns of the neighbors who live next to those conservation lands.
Here we go. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, so we have been requested to make a presentation to the Board of County Commissioners to talk about how we are managing these newly acquired wild spaces properties. They understand that any new land purchase brings with it new responsibilities and new costs. I always find it useful to, to go back to the kind of the source and make sure that everybody's calibrated properly about what we're actually trying to do with the lands that that we acquire. So I'm sure you all are familiar very well with the mission of Alachua County Forever. This is the list of lands that we've acquired since the new wild spaces funding has been available. Started out with the Weiss property, now Four Creeks Preserve, back in September of 2018. And since then, we've acquired 5,213 acres in fee for a total of $19.5 million. You'll also see the columns over on the right that show partner contributions. Those are over and above what the county has put in. So that's an extra $2.2 million. And the acreages that are listed are those that are owned outright by those partners. So 245 acres were purchased by the city of Gainesville as part of the Weiss acquisition. 7.72 is part of from ACT as part of the Serenola acquisition, and so on. So that's really the universe we're talking about. Where are those properties located? Well, the county has preserves all over the county, and our new acquisitions have followed that trend. So all the ones that were listed on the previous slide are shown in one of these circles here. Of course, the two biggest acquisitions thus far are the 1,861 acres down in the southeast corner of the property, the Alachua Slough purchase from Weyerhaeuser. And then again from Weyerhaeuser, just closed on in January, the Parcel E, now called Bee-Tree Creek Preserve, up here. But we've got properties that are additions to larger preserves, such as the Wolfsheimer property down here at Bar Hammock. And then we've got some new standalone preserves, such as the Black Lake Preserve over here near Melrose. This is just another way to look at kind of the same information. This lists all of our preserves, and the color of the bar shows the funding source that it came from. So with the first rounds of funding, we got the biggest preserve, Bar Hammock. And as you see, there have been a couple of additions, including the Wolfsheimer addition from the current round of Wild Spaces Public Places. And we've added on to Lake Alto, we've added on to Buck Bay Flatwoods. But then you see that we have acquired properties that are brand new preserves for the county. And I mentioned the two biggest ones, Alachua Slough and Bee-Tree. Four Creeks is a new one, Black Lake, and several smaller ones. Who's managing those properties? Well, my predecessor, Ramesh Bush, did an outstanding job of attracting partners, both with dollars to acquire land and also with the ability to manage properties. And so in 2016, there were 9,000 acres, a little over 9,000 acres that were actually managed by county staff, 8,300 acres managed by some, I've got that backwards. 8,300 acres managed by county staff, 9,100 acres managed by some partner, and 2,000 acres in conservation easements. Oops, excuse me. You go to today, and with the additions of Alachua Slough and Bee-Tree, we're now in a position where county staff is managing a little over 13,000 acres. We have increased a little bit the partnership management up to 9,500, and we still have the same number of acres of conservation easements. Well, here's the point. Sorry, I keep doing that. Here's the point in the presentation where I start to make some recommendations. And we have a proposal which has been sent out to all of you from the University of Florida for the management of the Bee-Tree Creek Preserve. If the Board of County Commissioners likes that concept and allows the staff to go forward with an agreement, that would reduce our management load for staff from 13,000 to a little under 12,000 acres. It would increase the partner share, as you see there. But we've got a moving target the whole time. And I looked at just those properties where we have a letter of intent, basically at least a handshake agreement with the landowner for the purchase of their property. We basically agreed on the price of the property. And just if we add those properties within about the next year, we could be up to county management of 16,500 acres and partner management, including UF of 10,000 acres. And we've got the large Hitchcock conservation easement that could bring us up to 4,200 acres in conservation easements. So our responsibility is increasing pretty much every day. I thought it just might be interesting to kind of show you how our properties lay out in terms of land use. We have a real high diversity of different land types on county property. I don't expect you all to try to read all the items in the list there on the left, but you can see that the biggest proportion of county property is in pine plantations, both in what has been termed coniferous plantations and some of this that's in forest regeneration. So that's up to 27% of our land base. We've also got, 12% that's in, sure enough, freshwater marsh, and some smaller areas that are in wet prairies, shrub and brushland, that type of thing. But then around all that, we've got mixed hardwood and conifer forest and, mixed wetland hammocks and swamps. So really a high diversity of land that we're trying to manage.
Charlie, before you jump off the slide, can I ask a question?
Sure.
As far as the stuff under easement management, would that be mostly the plantations, or would it be a mix throughout?
No, it would not. Jason, some of what we have under easement is cropland. Some of what we have is pasture land. So there's, quite a diversity. You see that reflected in improved and unimproved pasture down here and field crops.
Charlie, we lost your audio, maybe?
Can you hear me now?
Can you all hear the rest of us on Zoom?
There's no issue. I can hear
Right,
other
but
Zoom people
the people in the conference room, can you hear me?
Yeah, Amanda, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me? I'm
We
talking.
can't hear you.
Okay, so this is the same issue that we had last time.
All right.
So I'm gonna chat.
I'm gonna hang up our phone, everybody stay online and dial us back in and see if that reconnects the audio.
Okay.
Amanda, can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can hear each other. I think the problem is on their end.
Right.
Amanda, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we got you back.
Okay, great. Charlie, do you want to continue?
I will continue.
We just lost her again.
Oh, no.
What? You all can't hear us now?
Hear you? No.
Somebody say something.
Hello?
Nope, we're not hearing you again.
Okay,
Very weird.
this is the same issue that happened at the last meeting.
Okay, we'll try this one more time. Apologies.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Goodbye.
She sounded like she was trying really hard not to be angry about the fact that she didn't get any numbers entered.
That's the advantage to being a robot.
Indeed.
Five calls.
All right, can you all hear us? Oh, I think they're still trying.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Goodbye.
All right, Andy, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Charlie,
Now
we'll
we
throw it
can.
back to you.
Okay, one more time.
And it just went out again.
Seriously?
Okay, we lost you. I don't.
So could Charlie just call into the Zoom just on his phone so we could hear him?
Well, then the other folks won't.
I know, but,
You can still hear us.
Yes.
Me? Yes. Thumbs up.
Can you hear me? This is
I was
Kevin.
gonna sit off my laptop, but we'll have to disconnect that or else we're gonna hear terrible echoes.
Andy, can you hear
I will try it.
Kevin?
Disconnect the phone and then have the audio on.
Wait till you get,
Laptop.
wait till you get.
I'm just using a phone, so I was wondering if phone is any better than
Because the other thing
computer.
is Charlie
All
could
them
just
covered
call
in
my
here.
phone and I could just put it on speaker.
yeah.
But then if he,
But I mean, he just calls in to the Zoom session, can't we just hear just him?
But we couldn't hear anybody
And
else.
Charlie, continue to.
Well, they'll have to type in there. I do this all the time, you have to
Chat.
type it, yeah, in the chat.
Yeah, I just put
Here's
something in the
setting up
chat.
right there.
I just put
yeah,
something in the
okay.
chat.
if I recall, what is Amanda saying?
It might be, with the
I
screen
just
share.
put something in the chat.
Right, okay. It could be, although it seemed like we overcame that hurdle
Last time.
last time, though none of us know how.
At this point, I'm hearing a crackling. Is anybody else hearing the crackling? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, crackle.
Whoa. And feedback.
All right, how's that?
That's good. Okay, can people in the room hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so can we throw it back to Charlie? Are we good to go?
Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So once we acquire a piece of property, it sets a whole series of actions into play here. So immediately we've got to look at things at site security. We've got to start doing detailed surveys. We start to draft a management plan and on and on. And then, let me see if I can move to the next slide. Now I seem to be frozen. I'm sorry for the glitches, folks.
It's okay, it happens.
Yeah, there we go. Just took a minute. Often, when we, get a new piece of property, we find some initial challenges that we have to overcome. A lot of times there's solid waste that's been left on the property. We've got road or trail conditions that we need to deal with. We have to make sure that the property is safe, and we always seem to have plenty of invasive exotic plants. So, like this nice bed of Ardesia that you see here. And then before we even think about opening it up to the public, we've got a whole nother step of our set of steps that we have to go through. We have to do the master site planning. We have to go through public input process, engineering and designing, getting the budget in place, going through our purchasing. So, it's really quite a long process by the time we purchase a piece of property, make sure it's safe and secure, take care of initial management needs, and then start to work on the public access portion. So, in all that, where are we with these new properties? Well, actually, I think we've made some really good progress just since 2018 when we purchased the Four Creeks Preserve. So in the second column from the right, you'll see whether properties are open or not. And we have 5 of the properties that we've acquired that are already basically open to the public, and a number of others that we feel are under management well enough and safe enough that we can actually offer them by appointment. If there were a group like Audubon, say, that wanted to go out and look at a particular property, they could call us up and say, hey, we'd like to go out and see the sand hills on the Kennard property, and staff could make that happen. We have some other properties that we think, would be appropriate for establishment of a trailhead and those type of things, parking area. We've put in some projected dates where we think we might be able to do that. So for instance, the Buck Bay Flatwoods, about halfway through there, that's an addition to existing county property that is already partially prepared for public opening. So we think in a year, we can have that property open. Some other properties like the Lochloosa Slough, it's going to take us several more years before we really get that property under control and can have it open. In the meantime, we are working on data collection in some areas, and in other areas, we've gotten to the point where we actually have management plans in draft. And we'll have to take those through the Board of County Commissioners and get that approved before we can, take that final step towards opening it up to the public. Here's just a kind of high-level list of all the things that we have to consider in our land management. Inventory and planning is always a big one at the front end. And then the natural resource management, 2 of the biggest ticket items that consume a lot of resources, both in staff time and, money, are prescribed burning and invasive species control. Then when you get into public use, you're talking about infrastructure, maintenance, and then there's just the managing of the people once you get it open. On top of all that, Andy and a number of her staff are working each month to support Land Conservation Board through evaluating properties and serving as liaison for the group. Some examples of projects that we've got underway right now on various properties I mentioned solid waste. We've still got that problem at the Black Lake Preserve near Melrose. Wakahuta is another property that has that issue. We are working on infrastructure for the Sweetwater parking lot. We're working with other EPD staff and GRU for that. We've been talking with the city about eventually putting in a parking lot for the Four Creeks Preserve. And we've got plans for an overlook at the Turkey Creek Preserve, which we are actually having our grand opening on our ribbon cutting on Monday morning. And Andy's going to tell you a little bit more about that. Habitat restoration, we've got timber harvesting and reforestation that's underway, ground cover restoration, invasive species and burning again and again. We have other management responsibilities that we have to take care of in and around all that. A larger one these days is monitoring and managing conservation easements. We've also talked about our department's new role in Cuskawilla, and the board has agreed to take on a 70-acre tract that's being purchased by the state on Lake Santa Fe, the Murphy tract. It's a great little acquisition, but they said, you know, the only way they wanted to buy the property is if the county agreed to manage it, and the Board of County Commissioners agreed to do so. So just extra duties. We've tried to get a handle on what our gaps and our needs are in a couple of different ways. This is one chart that Andy put together that looks at the number of acres of management per staff person. And if you start over on the left, back near the beginning of the program, as you would expect in just about any acquisition program, they were basically underwater. You had 3,700 acres for every staff person to manage. That's quite a load. By the time 2008 came around, that had been reduced to 1,400 acres per person. That was actually the low. And through the acquisitions that we've been making recently, we've kind of been upping that again, so that here, you know, looking at the most recent acquisitions, we're back up to over 2,000 acres per staff person. Another thing that we've been doing is looking at how we measure up against other agencies. One source of great data on land management costs is a report that's put out every year by the Land Management Uniform Accounting Council for all state-owned lands. And you can see how different agencies measure up in these different management areas. As you might expect, DRP, which is Recreation and Parks within DEP, the state parks have got the highest per unit cost at $154 per acre. Florida Forest Service and Fish and Wildlife Commission are at much lower levels, but of course they're dealing with a much lower level of management. Their typical management units are 27 to 29,000 acres apiece, whereas the typical state park is about 4,500 acres. That really lines up much better with the county. And so, you know, we kind of compare ourselves a little bit with state parks. We don't have the level of public use that they do, but still, one way to think about county-owned properties is that basically we've got, you know, 5 or 6 county parks, or I mean state parks spread around the county that we're trying to manage. So how do we take care of this growing management responsibility? Well, one way that we can kind of get over the hump here, we think, is to perhaps look at a portion of the wild spaces funding. And this is a busy slide, I know, but the important thing to look at right there at the top is that so far, total collections for Wild Spaces Public Places have been $47.7 million for the last 45 months, over the last 45 months. When you take the 90% of the county's portion, you come up with an allocation for conservation of 37.5 million. And we have spent 17.5 or 17.6 million of that. So, and we've also gotten a grant for the Serenola Forest property. So right now, cash in hand, we have about $21.2 million. So our proposal would be to take a 10% share of everything that's come in for conservation and put that into a management startup fund. So that would be $3.75 million based on past collections. And then over the rest of the life of Wild Spaces Public Places, that could add an additional roughly $1.2 million a year. That would, I think, buy us, probably 3 years or so management on each of these new properties and get us where we're set up with stable management. So these are our recommendations to the County Commission. Number one, as I just stated, is to set aside 10% of the land conservation allocation from Wild Spaces for startup costs. Number two is to pursue the agreement with UF for the Bee Tree Creek Preserve, as I mentioned, because that'll take 1,200 acres of management responsibility right off the top for us. We need to continue pursuing a location and budget for our field support facility that has been budgeted in the past, and we think we have a location, so that should be fairly easy one to accomplish. And then we're always looking for opportunities to have policy and planning discussions with the Board of County Commissioners so they can fully understand, basically what they're taking on through this acquisition program.
Charlie, thank you. So I'm sure that there are a lot of questions and some comments. So I'm going to follow the example of our absent chair, Russ, and I'll just start off with the folks on Zoom, and I'll go around and ask, just who I see in front of me, and then I'll jump over to the folks in the room. So Bruce, you are first up. What questions and comments do you have for Charlie?
No questions. Good presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. Next, Brett.
No questions, thank you.
Okay, Brian.
Same, no questions.
Wes.
No question.
Okay. Oh, Wes, that's right. You're in the room. So I'm having trouble seeing who's in the room. So if you all can just sort of go around the table yourselves, that would be helpful to me.
Timber sales, where does the money go from that?
So timber sales go back into a fund to fund management for the property from which the timber was sold.
Is that not enough to make the 10% surtax unnecessary?
No, sir. On average, we have been selling about $90,000 of timber per year. So it helps, but it's not a huge amount.
The second question is there a mandate that all of the acquired properties have to be open to the public? Well, I would think that wildlife conservation, E.O. Wilson says we need to save 50% of the Earth's surface for wildlife, and it doesn't all have to be open to the public.
Yes, we agree with you, and there are some properties that are not open for public use. I mentioned that in some cases we have properties where we will make arrangements to take a group out, but they're not just generally open to the public. And I'm sure that will be the case going forward as well.
Thanks.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, two questions, and they're both about the proposed Bee Tree Creek. Ooh, that doesn't really roll off the tongue. Bee Tree Creek Preserve, Management Agreement proposal. I guess it's a cost, savings proposal in that IFAS would pay for the management? Or cost share?
Yes, at least in part. So you all may recall that when we put the deal together with Weyerhaeuser for that property, they retained some timber rights for up to 10 years. So they will be harvesting timber out there. And it will be the county's responsibility to reforest those areas. So that 10% of the wild spaces funds would partially, in my mind, go towards reforestation of that. Once those lands are reforested, then yes, the university is willing to kick in funding for, day-to-day management and operations on the property.
Okay, can I ask another question? Oh, so if they come up with IFAS comes up with a management plan, does the county have any kind of review authority on that management plan? Is it a cooperatively agreed upon plan?
Yes,
Okay.
we already have an agreement with St. John's and the university for the management of one of the properties nearby. The management agreement that we anticipate would be patterned similar to that, and there is definitely a provision for county review and approval of any management plan.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Charlie, the 10%, I mean, that would be used for putting in parking, gates, what stuff needed to provide access to the public?
That would be part of it. It would be pretty much anything from perhaps fencing, road improvements, establishment of facilities for public use, some of the initial restoration, treatment of exotic species, any of the above.
Okay, so you're requesting like board approval to say that we're going to have a cap of 10, we can use up to 10% of the funding for management activities. And then my last question would be, did you approach UF about picking up Balu Forest? The county manages that, right? Would they have possibly have interest in picking that up as well?
We have had discussions, in our discussions about Bee Tree, we have also talked about Balu. At this point, we're not talking about, an agreement for the university to pick up any of Balu. We feel we've got that under pretty good management regime. The other odd thing about Balu, of course, is that it's not technically it's not an Alachua County forever property. It's still designated as a potential landfill, and we basically manage it on behalf of the solid waste department.
Okay.
So it makes it a little more complicated in trying to do a deal with the university.
Are there,
You had a slide that was cost per acre for the three state agencies.
Yes.
And you were comparing that to, I may have missed it. Is there a reason why you don't have it for cost per acre for the county's activities?
Savannah?
A current cost per acre?
You were saying that you would be more resembling the state parks. But I just was curious, I thought we were sort of critiquing this as well. And if I was a county commissioner, I would ask why you didn't include, or why you weren't able to calculate the cost per acre for the county's activities.
Yeah, that's a great question. We're actually still massaging those numbers. I believe the county's cost per acre, when you do it this same way, is about $180 per acre compared with state parks,
Going
150.
to the word massage.
Other questions from in the room?
Yes, Wes?
Oh, no,
Okay, Charlie, if it's all right, I had a quick question about the startup fund, that money that you're setting aside.
Sure.
Is that, how is that going to work? Is that going to be just put aside and saved? Is it invested? Does the county, do you have direct responsibility for that money? Who manages that and how would that work?
No, actually, the Office of Management and Budget will, keep track of all of that, and they can, set it aside in a fund
Okay.
dedicated for management. And
I
of
think it
course,
sounds like
they handle the interest on,
right.
all funds that the county holds.
They do the fun stuff.
Yes.
I think what they do is fun. In any case, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Charlie, what you all are hoping for is that we maybe perhaps make a motion to approve those recommendations so that you can take that information to the board with your presentation. Is that correct?
That would be very helpful.
Okay, so is there anybody, do we want more discussion about this? Can we move to the recommendation slide so that we can all just get those fresh in our heads?
Amanda, this is Andy. Ed had to leave before we got through the presentation, so we no longer have an in-person quorum.
Okay, so does that mean that we need to stop the meeting, or just that we can't take any votes on anything?
Madam Chair, I think it means that you can't take a vote.
Okay.
And we have it reflected in the minutes that we endorse the idea by consensus or something like that. This is a note in the minutes.
we do like a roll call, not vote.
Yeah. Charlie, I don't know if you could hear Susan's question about is there a way that the LCB members that are here in person can reflect their thoughts in the minutes on this, or is that worthwhile given the process that we're following for these hybrid meetings?
Well, I think we can include whatever the board would like in the minutes. And of course, board members do have the ability to, reach out to county commissioners as individuals.
Well, is it possible for us to sort of each person bear with me real quick, each person give a consensus saying that Jason approved but was supportive of the presentation? Is that helpful at all? Because we can quickly do it. Unless someone has a problem, we can just all say we endorse the presentation. We think it's following along.
Yeah, essentially I could ask Brian to go around the membership and ask everyone to say, do they support the recommendations or not? And just put that in the minutes, because the minutes are supposed to record what we discuss in the meeting, so.
And I can certainly report that to the commission when we make the presentation.
Brian, I saw your eyebrows raised there a bit. What's your take on this? You're muted.
Yeah, I don't really have any thoughts. My eyebrow was raising because we officially cannot take any action
Right.
as a board. So comments from individual members can be kept in the minutes, but that's all.
I think under the circumstances of someone leaving mid-meeting and resolving the quorum, it's useful to show that everybody was in consent. Okay.
The only question I have is about the timing of this, and do we want to table it for the next meeting where we actually do have a quorum where we can take a vote?
Well, I believe that the presentation that Charlie has to give is just before our next meeting. Is that right?
That's correct, March 23rd.
He can't do this on email, right?
No, I don't think so the other option that we have is we could choose to try to meet next month a week early if we, meet on perhaps Thursday, the 18th instead of Thursday, the 25th. That's another possibility. But
I don't know that we can even do that without a quorum.
you're right. Yeah, I mean, actually, we're not going to be able to.
Adjourn. We're
We're
going to be
not
stuck here for a month.
No, but I mean, are we going to be able to approve our next meeting date? I'm not. So unfortunately, Sandy and I both went to parliamentarian training that the county paid for us to have. Unfortunately, we were trained in Robert's Rules of Order, which is not what the county uses. So the county paid for training that the county doesn't use. So I'm not really sure what to do here.
Well, the meeting is set, so we don't need to vote on it unless we change it.
Right.
Okay.
It is automatic unless we change it.
Okay.
Right. I
And we
agree with
want
that.
to see. I mean, the motion to adjourn, the meeting can keep going. I mean, it's not, I don't think that you have to do that. I think there's actually a rule that if you lose a quorum, the meeting is effectively over as far as any kind of motions go.
It has become a workshop.
Yeah. So when it comes to that, we can't communicate with each other on communicate. Can we write a letter and send it to him to take with him for his thing?
I suppose you could do that as an individual. That would, right? As an individual?
Okay.
That was going to be my suggestion. Anybody who wants to have a voice should send an email or a letter to Charlie.
Well, he could circle back.
Well, I will say it gives Paul an opportunity to actually flesh out exactly what your concerns are.
For those of you in the room, why did you all let Ed leave? You should have just pulled him down and said no.
I didn't realize it.
With a 6-foot rule, it's hard to not, tackle.
All right, so I guess at this point, it's up to individual members of the board to send a letter or email to Charlie expressing their opinions about the recommendations that he laid out in his excellent presentation. Thank you, Charlie.
Copy of the presentation, so the memory, see through. I can email it to everybody.
Okay, I think we're ready to move on to our last big item on the agenda, which is Byron. I thought I saw him on, there he is, yes. Byron, you're up. Acquisition updates. It looks like we got something new rather recently, didn't we?
Yeah, and let me share my screen. Hang on. If I can do this, I'm having to VPN through the office and hang on, and my own computer at home.
I have found that VPNs don't work very well with Zoom, but
yeah. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
All right. I'm becoming a computer wizard. Not by choice. All right, so we don't have much new, but and this is kind of a repeat from last month, but I know you all like to see what's happening on the acquisition side since you only see these once a month, and it helps you have the big picture. So again, we had 2 closings right at the end of last year. November, we had the Lake Santa Fe Paget property and the Austin Cary, what we were calling it Parcel E, which is now the Bee Tree Creek Preserve. So those are now county conservation lands. And this is the map of the Paget area, which is this pink shade area adjacent to Swanee River Water Management District conservation land, and also other Alachua County property, and it gives you an idea of where we are in conjunction to some of our other properties and other water management district properties. And our newest potential acquisition is right here around Hickory Pond, which is we'll see a slide of that in a minute. So we're getting closer to making a whole corridor around this area between Lake Alto and Little Lake Santa Fe. Again, you've already seen that. That's our new Bee Tree Creek Preserve. Here's what's the main things that are happening right now. I keep talking about the Lake Santa Fe Den property, which is just south of the Paget property. This is the Den property right here in this blue outline. We've got a contract, we've got an agreement on price. We're very close. We even have county attorney approval on the form of the contract, which is a little bit different type of contract than we usually do. But we've got some old mineral rights issues on the big two parcels that should be cleared up soon. And then we've got on these three smaller parcels, we have some mineral rights issues that I'm having to talk to the property owner's attorney about how we can clear those up. And once we get those cleared up, we can move forward with a acquisition of these pieces. We're still working with the Carr family down in the Bar Hammock area. We have consensual agreement to just about everything. We just have to get contracts finalized. Over on the Santa Fe River, you all know we've been working with the Hitchcock's Ranch for a conservation easement over 2,000 acres, which we refer to as kind of a working agricultural land easement. We've been working with U.S. Department of Agriculture Natural Resource Conservation Service through their agricultural land easement program on that. And right now we're still working through that process. We may have some changes to report to you by next month, but that is still just kind of working through several things. So we've got a long way to go there. Also on the Santa Fe River, we have the Matthews family property. We have a conservation easement proposed, and the property owner is considering an offer as we speak, and they're trying to figure it out if it makes sense for them on their side. Also on the Santa Fe River, we have the Brown property. We have a conservation easement there. We've got acceptance from the property owner. However, out of our control and out of the property's owned by a married couple who are now all of a sudden going through a divorce. So that's being held up because of that process. So we're just waiting on that one. The Alachua Creek Flatwoods area, we have the Brown family. We're really excited about this property. I'll show you a map. If you remember, it includes the Alachua Creek from County Road 2082 down south, and we're adjacent to other conservation lands. It's an incredible property, and I'm anticipating a signed contract coming back to us in the next 3 to 4 weeks on that one, and we'll be getting it to the county commission. The big one we're working on right now, Alachua Slough Flatwoods, the Fox Pen Connector. I'll show you a map in a second. That's about 4,000 acres. It connects, we call it the connector because it connects Fox Pen to the north to Alachua Slough to the south. And that is just to the east of Highway 301, south of Hawthorne, all the way to the county boundary with Putnam County. And I've been talking to Weyerhaeuser almost every day and this week, and I'm expecting a signed contract possibly tomorrow, which we should hopefully, if everything works well, knock on wood, we'll be able to get that to the county commission for a vote by March 23rd. The new project that wasn't on last month's list is this one at the bottom, Lake Santa Fe. The Jefferson property, that's the one I just mentioned to you that I'm going to show you. We have the offer accepted by the property owner. We have a contract negotiated. It's with the county attorney's office, making sure they're okay with it. And so we hope to get that one in front of the county commission for a vote, hopefully in April. So here's that map again you just saw. Here's the Jefferson property that I mentioned to you, the newest one. So you can see over here, Paget property, we own that, adjacent to Swanee River Water Management District, adjacent to the Lake Alto Preserve, and over here on Lake Santa Fe, we have the Santa Fe Swamp. So right in the middle and connecting by this little catty corner is we have this new Jefferson family property, and it covers this huge wetland area and this around Hickory Pond. And then of course these other parcels, the Fisher Johns property is now owned by a new owner who's interested in a conservation easement. And down here, the Murphy property, I'll mention to you, the state's buying that property. And Charlie mentioned that already as well. And then the county will manage it. So, you know, here is a corridor forming around these important water bodies. And there's a close-up of the Jefferson family property. They do have a lot of this upland is in managed silviculture and timber. So that the value of that timber came into factor into the negotiated price. Here's the Brown family property on Alachua Creek. As you can see, it is surrounded by existing conservation land, which is both belongs to the county and to the Water Management District down in this area. And this is Hawthorne Road, Highway 20 up here, and this is County Road 2082. So the latest footprint of this project cuts off this tiny little 5-acre piece with this yellow structure, which is a old trailer. Family decided they want to keep that, and there's a small 4-acre piece down here. Family wanted to keep that, so we've agreed to that, and we've reappraised the property. And so, like I said, we should have a contract signed by the family very soon. Here's the Alachua Slough area and the Fox Pen Connector area, the 4,000-acre parcel owned by Weyerhaeuser's. And here's Fox Pen up here, so you can see it connects. And Lake Alachua, also near other conservation lands. So this one we're right on the cusp of this one. Keep your fingers crossed that everything goes well, and hopefully I'll have a new, more solid update for you next month. Here's a close-up of that area. It shows some of the roads that run, the timber roads that run through there. And to finish, we still have 2 donations that are almost complete. The Lundgren family property and the Warney property. Lundgren is on the Santa Fe River. I think maybe we'll have a update for you that the county owns it by the next month, knock on wood. I think we'll have the same report for the Warney property for you next month. And then the Murphy property that I mentioned to you, which is, we're saving a little bit of money there since the state is buying that through Florida Forever money. And then of course, but we'll manage it, and it'll come into factoring into our management costs. Here's where the Lundgren property is, up here, this red piece on the Santa Fe River. And there's a close-up of the Lundgren property. It has the Moccasin Creek, as its name, runs right through the middle of it. And there's the Murphy property in red, and outlines with our other properties that we've been talking about tonight. And that's it. That's the update. Here's the Murphy property, a close-up.
Thank you. Lots going on. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Byron? Thumbs up. Yes, a ditto. I'm with Brian. Okay, so it looks like our next meeting date is set for March 25th, and I we'll wait to hear from Andy because I'm sure she'll be reaching out to us ahead of that date to establish whether we'll be able to have an in-person quorum or not. So Andy, we'll expect to hear from you in 3 weeks or so.
Yes, definitely. And may I just insert something under staff updates? Sorry, it's not listed there, but
Sure.
Yeah, the Turkey Creek Preserve opening. Turkey Creek Preserve has opened to public access as of a couple weeks ago, soft opening, but there will be an opening event on Monday at 10 a.m. That will be, a formal county event to open that preserve to public access. It's definitely a moment to celebrate approximately a decade's worth of restoration work and action on that preserve for it to become available for public visitation. But I will just caution folks that might be considering attending. It's a socially distanced event, and there's only 21 parking spots in the parking lot, and no appropriate on-road parking. So we really want to celebrate everyone's role in that, including the LCB, but just please be advised, it's not a big non-COVID grand opening. We're not capable of supporting that level of opening in terms of attendance at this time. But we want everyone to be aware that that will be happening.
Thank you. I'll be at work, but I hope that someone from the Sun or the Alligator is there so that I can read about it.
Thank you.
Okay, so last thing on our list, do we have any comment from the public? Any public comment this evening? All right, if not, we can't make a motion to adjourn, but
We just declare.
I think we have completed everything we needed to on the agenda. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Amanda.
No, thank you, Charlie. Bye, everyone. Andy, are we good to go? Do you need anything from me?
Oh, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Bye. Thanks for taking notes as usual, Brian.
Of course.